Right, our guests today for our panel are Andy Cook, who is the Chief Executive of the Centre for Social Justice. He's in the studio with us. Good morning to you, Andy.
Good morning.
And Ashley Frawley, an Associate Professor of Sociology at Swansea University. Morning, Ashley.
Morning, just a correction. I'm no longer at Swansea. I'm now at the University of Kent.
Ah, okay. Well, that's very important. The University of Kent. Ashley, thank you very much for that. We're going to talk, first of all, about protests and tribalism. This, of course, because as the conflict in the Middle East continues, so do the protests. There have been concerns about protests interfering with remembrance processions. Suella Braverman says any protesters who vandalise the cenotaph should be jailed before their feet can touch the ground. And the Met Police say they're in discussion with pro-Palestinian groups intending to march on November the 11th for a route that avoids Whitehall. And Trevor Phillips has written in The Times today about how this war has brought out the worst kind of tribalism. It's a very interesting column. I would urge you to read it. Andy Cook, do you have a sense of tribalism when it comes to the current conflict that we are seeing unfolding in the Middle East as it's played out in the United Kingdom, or not so much?
Yeah, I read Trevor's piece. I thought it was belting, as ever. I think what's happened is a lot of people don't frankly understand what's going on over there. We saw the horrific attack and it was just awful. And then in terms of what happened to Israel, and then you saw all the kind of response, and equally there's just horrendous things going on. But what feels like it's happening is you're being forced into tribalism, picking a side. You don't really know where to be. Well, you know, the kind of classic line of a silent majority sat out there, I do think is sat out there watching. But where I think that will change is if it starts to impinge on some of the stuff we do here that's of real kind of power to us. Things like the remembrance stuff. I was on Friday night, I was at the Leicester versus Leeds game, of which your viewers will be aware that Leeds United got a great result. But at that game, they ended up marking the a kind of minute silence impeccably. And this is, you know, football supporters all watching and listening to that. I think if things start to change for next weekend, the silent majority will become less silent and will be forced to start being a bit crosser about certain situations because, you know, people taking on our own memories for their own gain.
That's interesting. Ashley Frawley, what do you make about this? You know, this is, again, I don't know who we're talking about here. Who are the people who would object to a peaceful protest, but potentially taking place on Remembrance Day? We spoke to David Davis earlier on, who believes that these things can actually coexist as long as they're, I suppose, kept separately. Do you have a problem with a potential protest happening on Remembrance Day?
Well, I'll always fight for the right to protest. The issue becomes, I suppose, when if it escalates beyond something. But this is always the risk when it comes to freedom. You have to take the bad with the good, and you would hope that people would behave themselves. I do think that these things can coexist, and we need to have much more open discussions about this in society. And I am worried about this tribalism, as you say, where it's like pick a side, and if you don't pick a side, you're complicit in all of these awful things. I was at I don't find myself out at clubs very often, but I happened to be out at a club in London last week. And, my friend was outside and he asked for a cigarette from somebody. And this person said, reached for a cigarette and then said, "Oh, wait, are you a Jew?"
What?
And he said, yeah. And he says, "I'm not, but you can keep the cigarette because I'm not going to talk to an anti-Semite. Thank you."
Wow.
And it was really, really disturbing. Now, most people are not like this. Most people out protesting are there because they want to end the occupation. They're horrified by some of the things that are happening in Gaza. But for a few people, I think Israel can act as a surrogate for all sorts of other things. And that's where it can become really dangerous. It can be a surrogate for, decolonization battles that can't be fought in the West. Now, here's the opportunity. We can finally sort of win and do something about this. It's not just a metaphor anymore. Or ideas of what white supremacy that come from the United States that don't really make sense anywhere else, but are nonetheless transplanted there. And I've seen this in my own family. Like, we're Indigenous Canadian. And I was talking to people and they were like, you could see that there was almost this sense of empathy for this kind of cathartic violence against what they see as the colonizer. And I said to them, like, look, would it have been better if, instead of, like if the Indigenous people in Canada, reacted violently against the Irish settlers, rather than intermarrying with them eventually and producing people like us? Is that really a better kind of situation? So I think while a lot of people are horrified, they want peace. I think what can happen is when it becomes a surrogate for other things, then we start egging on escalating violence, and that's where you see, like, by any means necessary, from the river to the sea, on both sides, right? We just, no amount of violence is enough to, right these past wrongs. And I think we need to keep our heads on here. These are people's lives we're talking about, and I think the vast majority of people in Israel and in Palestine before this conflict wanted peace. And I think that's what we need to keep our eyes on. We're losing that. It's just escalating. It's really terrifying.
Andy, do you feel that that people are, maybe people that you fall into conversation with, expect you to pick a side, or are you able to, I don't know, to support both sides? I mean, I'm not necessarily asking you here, but do you feel pressurised into picking one over the other?
Yeah, I think that pressure builds because of some of the narrative. There's the kind of, again, we saw the horrific thing that started all of this, though then people will argue, no, it was already happening before, and then all the yes buts people. So then you feel like, I don't know what my opinion on this should be, other than it's just horrible going on. But then you start to see some of the marches happening, and then some things happening to our own monuments and different things like that. And you think this is escalating beyond stuff that's happening just in our own local community. So yeah, there's a feel like you should pick a side, but you don't know where to go, other than thinking, we don't understand why this is all going on.
And from a family point of view, because Ashley was talking there about how your family background and how your family kind of relations can lead to discussions, etc. How is that with you, with family and friends? Is this a topic that you try to avoid, or is it unavoidable?
It's it's public news at the moment, so it always crops up. But frankly, there's lots of this sounds a bit probably a bit dodgy, but there's lots of other things going on in people's lives right now as well. So it's not the number one topic, certainly in my family, that's going on. Things like the cost of living still, what the football results are. These things do matter to people that are often belittled. And so there's enough going on there that actually you think, I'll just move myself out of this conversation in some ways, until you're kind of forced into feeling like you have to have an opinion on it. And frankly, lots of people don't know what their opinion should be.
Okay.
Can you march in support of nuance? I wonder if the definition of a protest is you have to pick a side. Because you can't sort of do a chant. We look forward to peace on all sides, and we want to respect what happened to Israel on October the 7th, but also recognise that people in Gaza have rights as well. It doesn't sound like you almost...
No, you can march. There's a long tradition of anti-war protest, right? You can march for peace. You can march against war. You can march for a solution. You can demand that you not be your taxes not go to killing civilians. These sorts of things, people can march for. And I think a lot of people are marching for an end to the occupation. That's something, that the international community can take part in. It doesn't necessarily require so much unnecessary bloodshed. I mean, you do need to push for people to keep their heads on, because right now it's like no amount of violence would be enough, and it's got to stop.
Yeah, I think many people would agree with that. Let's talk about homelessness, because lots of people are really engaged by this this morning. The Home Secretary wants to reduce homeless people's use of tents in urban areas. Over the weekend, she tweeted, "We cannot allow our streets to be taken over by rows of tents occupied by people, many of them from abroad, living on the streets as a lifestyle choice." Claire Coutinho is the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. We asked her earlier if she'd use that same language herself.
Look, so I wouldn't have used necessarily those words, but in my experience, what you have is people often with very complex needs. Sometimes they might refuse accommodation, and that's often because they've got complicated problems in their life. Like I said, it might be addiction, it might be sort of mental health issues. And it is really important, I think, that we do get them into safe accommodation and get them that wider support.
The co-founder of The Big Issue and a crossbench member of the House of Lords, John Bird, came into the studio to tell us his experiences of people living in tents.
You see, the problem is, if you have a social problem, a social crisis, it will migrate often towards a law and order issue, because what you're doing is you're trying to sort out the problems of society on the streets. So it's almost like an outdoor NHS. It's almost like an outdoor social failure class.
He said there were very, very few people, but there were some people who had a lifestyle choice of being homeless, but not very many was really his conclusion on it. Andy, what do you make of this language from Suella Braverman? Do you think she was trying to be forthright and honest, or was she trying to whip up something here?
Oh, she was whipping up a bigger ice cream than Mr. Whippy on a summer's day. And you can tell there's an election coming, and this is why. Everyone's pumping their chests out, trying to look who's toughest, who's hardest. So there's a certain part of that. But the reason she's able to do that is because it resonates. And there's something that's why it's made stories throughout the weekend and then again this morning, because people, again, are, the biggest issue affecting people in the poorest communities, we've been up and down with those in our regional offices the last 9 months. The biggest issue is crime. Crime is massive, and ASB, people are talking about this all the time. So she's playing into something there that she knows is out there. The problem here is, as ever, talk is cheap in this way, and there's been plenty of time to change this situation around. The government themselves has a housing first model, which goes to the very root causes that a lot of the ministers are talking about, that they've piloted in 3 areas. It's working with 2,000 people, 88% success rate at changing their lives around. They have not rolled it out, and they could have done. So it's all talk at the moment. They've got the levers that they could do and to change.
So you could end homelessness.
They could certainly get very close. I mean, whether it'll end it fully, there's always, again, big narrative on that. But they could certainly have done a load more. We've been campaigning, my organisation, the CSJ, we helped design this model, which was with some of the big homeless charities, and they've piloted it in 3 areas. And honestly, they could have rolled this out long ago. So she can say all the words she wants, but there needs to be action.
Do you think there's lifestyle choices? Do you think that homelessness is a lifestyle choice for some people?
No, I think that people get into a rut of decision making, and in addiction fogs the whole mind in lots of ways anyway. I think there are ways that you can maneuver people into new realities and into new habits, absolutely, and that's what we should be aiming for.
Ashley, do you think Suella Braverman is cruel, as some people say, or is she tough talking and honest? How do you judge her? Because she's at the centre of this protest discussion as well. She wants to say people who protest in a certain way should be get sent to prison without touching the floor. She's at the centre of this story as well. She likes to be at the centre of these stories. How do you judge her for that?
I mean, a basic social and political education will have told her that homelessness is an incredibly complex issue. I don't think she's stupid. I'm sure that she knows that, this is a problem of policy, a problem of economics, a problem of infrastructure, as well as of addiction, of all sorts of individual factors that nonetheless are embedded in broader socioeconomic circumstances. So I'm sure she's aware of this, but I think she tends to adopt this sort of like hard talking, it's tell it like it is kind of line in order to sound like to kind of play into this whole look, we're populist narrative. But I don't think most people buy it. I think that most people are aware that the government has proven really cowardly in terms of dealing with deeper issues, in terms of committing to infrastructural issues, committing to economically bettering the lives of everyday people. And every time that they try to, be tough talking and tell it like it is, they come up with stupid policies that don't make any sense. So this idea, that she said weak policies in the U.S., like in San Francisco and Los Angeles, have led to an explosion of crime, drug taking, and squalor, as though it's simply like, most people would be in homes, but because there's no spikes on the street, they're just so tempted by that sidewalk. They're just, as though it's just weak policies that don't come down hard enough on people, when I think it's pretty well accepted that the United States and many of these cities are going through a period of economic and infrastructural decline. And our governing class has shown themselves to be completely unable and cowardly in dealing with that.
Yeah, what do you think, Asbeth? She's probably had 4 out of 5 critical comments. Do you think for us, it's probably there's a couple of people who say Suella Braverman is talking a certain amount of robustness, but generally speaking, the word callous seems to get used by some people when describing it.
I mean, her choice of words is attention grabbing and problematic at the same time.
I know lots of people say, just to finish that thing that she said, what I want to stop, this is to your point actually, Andy, and what the law-abiding majority wants us to stop is those who cause nuisance and distress to other people by pitching tents in public spaces, aggressively begging, stealing, taking drugs, littering and blighting our communities. That's sort of the crime side of things, as you were saying, Andy. Stay where you are, both of you, Andy Cook and Ashley Frawley. We're going to talk about getting people to have more babies and terrible tourists. This is Breakfast on Times Radio with Asma Mir and Stig Abel in association with ServiceNow, the intelligent platform for digital transformation powered by AI.
Download the new improved Free Times Radio app today and experience a range of brand new features, including Apple CarPlay and Android Auto functionality. You can listen to Times Radio via your Google Cast or Apple AirPlay-enabled speakers and TVs. Catch up on the latest award-winning podcasts from leading journalists at The Times and The Sunday Times. Plus, you can listen back to the last 7 days of Times Radio programs and pause, rewind, and fast-forward them as you wish. Download the Free Times Radio app from the App Store or Google Play today.
Strictly Come Dancing, the live tour. Coming to arenas across the UK in January and February. Everything you love about the TV series live. Get ready for an electrifying spectacle full of glitz and glamour as your favourite stars take to the dance floor. Tickets on sale now at strictlycomedancing.live.com. Don't miss Strictly Come Dancing, the live tour.
Come in.
Boss, news from Nationwide.
What are they doing now?
They've just confirmed they're keeping branches open.
Ha ha! What nonsense! Who needs a branch? I don't.
Yes, but...
What I need is happy shareholders. I don't care about happy customers.
Don't worry. Pretty sure Nationwide's customers won't be coming to us.
Unlike the big banks, we're not closing our branches. Nationwide, a good way to bank. To view our branch promise, search nationwide.co.uk/our promise.
Download the Red Box podcast today for the best political conversation.
Times Radio Breakfast with Asma Mir and Stig Abel with ServiceNow. Today, businesses face tough choices. Do you lower expenses or elevate experiences? Do both with the intelligent platform for digital business.
Right, we are going through the stories of the day with Andy Cook, who is the Chief Executive of the Centre for Social Justice, and Ashley Frawley, who is Associate Professor of Sociology at Kent University. And we are going to talk now about women in the UK, apparently, who want to have more children than they have. A poll by the think tank, the New Social Covenant Unit, found that women aged between 18 and 35 have one child fewer than they would like. We spoke to the Conservative MP Miriam Cates, who commissioned the report and has often advocated for people to have children on our programme.
92% of UK young women hope to become mothers one day. And on average, they wanted about 2.4 children. So that's a lot more children than women are currently having. So it's really good news that women want to have children. And you said in your introduction that I want people to have children. I do if they want to. And of course,
obviously, yes.
The evidence is that the vast majority want to. But sadly, looking at the stats and looking at how fertility rates are declining, probably about 1 in 4 of young women are going to end their childbearing years childless.
Ashley, let me come to you first, predictably, on this one. Do you think...
As a woman.
Yeah, as a woman, hashtag as a woman. Miriam Cates made the point in that interview that the economic factors, it's expensive to have children, it's expensive to have childcare, to have a house big enough for 1, 2, 3, 4 children, whatever it might be. So there's the economic side of things. And then she also talked about the cultural side of things, which is she feels that being a mother is devalued in the UK, that it's kind of looked down upon. Do you think, well, which of those reasons do you buy when it comes to women not having as many children as they would like to?
Well, with anything, there's no one cause of something so complex. But I mean, it is cost. It's very expensive. The costs are going up, and childcare is extremely expensive. But I think also the cultural side is extremely important, and not just in terms of motherhood being devalued, but paradoxically being too much valued. That is, there's almost no social problem that can't ultimately be blamed on mothers. Well, they say, where are the parents? But what they mean is, ladies, you're not cooking nice, healthy food at home, are you? You're taking your children to McDonald's. That's why they're so fat. There's always this sort of veiled critique of women. There's no social problem that can't come down to women's wombs. And I sound like a feminist, I'm not, but but it is that there's too much valuation, I think, on parenthood, where parenting is seen as the cause of a huge range of social problems when they're just wicked issues that can't be solved. So they just keep going deeper and deeper into what parents do. And we need to calm down a little bit. Making parenting so goal-oriented destroys it. It kills the joy of it. But also it means that, first of all, being a dual earner family is seen as a prerequisite for having a family across the EU, in the UK for a long time. You've got to have 2 parents with an income before you can even think about having children. That's what the good citizen does. But at the same time, the woman must be both an intensive worker and an intensive parent. So she has to parent intensively. She's got to be there. She's got to be on the kid all the time. You can't do anything sort of passively. So it's no surprise then if you want to have more children, you're going to work part-time or you may give up your job. And then people say, well, gosh, why are there so few CEOs? It must be misogyny in society. No, it's women out-earn men up until they have kids. Once they have kids, they wind up working fewer hours and that sort of thing. So we have to keep all of this in mind, because then if you want to have more children, you have to think, well, not only is it expensive, but can I afford it if I work part-time, if I give up my job, if I have to live up to these expectations of being an intensive mother. Of course, you're just a mother after that.
That's absolutely fascinating. Has it discouraged you, Ashley?
I would love to have more children. I have 2 children. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. I'd love to have more children. But I even knowing about this sort of intensive parenting, even I'm not immune to this mother guilt. And I think, can I give a 3rd child enough of my time? And are my kids going to blame me when they get older that I worked so much? So it is something that I have to think about.
Oh, yes. Andy, what do you think? Do you think that that it's the... Well, is it the economics for you of conversations that you've maybe had with women, female friends? Is it the economics? Is it the culture? What is it that means that women in the UK, according to this poll, have 1 child fewer than they would like?
Well, I'd start by saying I think it's absolutely fantastic that these conversations are happening genuinely in an area where everyone's kind of sick with politicians and politics and all the rest. Actually having some serious conversations about what's going on the macro environment is more important than ever. So, genuine hats off to Miriam for driving all of this. Is it the economics? Is it the culture? I think it's totally both. And I think from what I've read into the poll, it bears out on both. No one can afford, it feels, families anymore, and that's a big driver. But equally, I disagree actually with the last point about kind of people feeling motherhood is overvalued. I think actually people want a more driver to say this is one of the most critical things you can do, and we should be.
No, that's the problem. That's what I'm saying. It is both undervalued and overvalued. It's when you say it's the hardest job in the world, what you're saying is it should be, and if it's not, you're lazy and you're slacking.
I wasn't saying that at all.
Go on then, Andy. What were you saying?
I was saying that, a poll of 78% of parents with children under 4 want to spend more time with them. Why? They're their pride and joy. And actually that should be celebrated by countries that we're living in. So the tax system, everything's marshalled towards childcare as family policy at the moment, when actually lots of people want choice in that. Do they want to spend more time with their children? Yes. Do they not? And that's the conversation we need to be having, and actually glorifying what an incredible job it is as a parent to bring your child up. And you can have all the riches and achievements in your professional world that you want. But I know certainly from my wife's understanding of it, there's nothing better than seeing your child do great stuff. And I think we need to have that as part of this conversation.
How many children have you got?
3, although after this weekend, my wife would have been happy with just having 2, quite frankly.
Right, okay.
I had a surprise 3rd, and that does tilt things. It definitely tilt things.
You've got to go from, we call it man-to-man marking to zonal marking, and zonal marking never works.
It doesn't work at all, does it? No, it does not work at all. Let's move on. That's really interesting stuff from both of you on that. Now, tourism is a rather lucrative business. It's not always so loved by the locals. Things have been getting so bad in Amsterdam from British tourists that a digital discouragement campaign has begun to try and dissuade people from travelling there. That's after 2019's cap on flights to the Netherlands. The numbers are in, and it seems to be working. Brits are staying away. Is this just snobbishness? I'm going to accuse myself of snobbishness. So I don't ever want to go to a place where I'm surrounded by lots of tourists, even though I am a tourist myself, and therefore I'm kind of both part of it. It's like no one recognises they're part of traffic. You blame traffic, and then you're in a car, and in fact, of course, you are part of traffic as well. Andy, Is there a problem with Brits abroad that still exists? Well, ask Ashley as someone who's got a different perspective. But as a Brit, is there a problem still with Brits abroad, do you think?
Well, I guess it kind of depends where you go to, quite frankly. And I've been to all of these places on stag do's, on lads do's, and all the rest.
Have you?
And 100%, of course, I'm holding my
Oh,
hands
you're
up.
part of the problem.
Yeah, of course I am. But I think that's what you've got to ask yourself. This kind of, frankly, these places have set themselves up to thrive off this kind of tourism. I think there's a deeper question of things like the liberalisation of some of the drug laws and other laws like that of course, that cause the hordes to come flocking in. And then you go there, and that's what people are there for. And so you pump people with cheap booze and drugs and all the rest, and you're going to get some of that. And it's, so no wonder now they're kind of thinking, wow, what have we done here? So, of course, you go to those places and it is a bit embarrassing at times when you look around. But equally, I think there's a deeper question of these areas that have liberalised to a certain extent will start challenging themselves over the next number of years.
And maybe that's a good thing for them to do. Ashley, what do you make of Brits abroad? And have you ever done a Larry Hen weekend?
No, I haven't. I'm very tame. But Canadians in Amsterdam didn't used to have the greatest reputation also,
really?
I must say. So I got some skin in this game. Look, it is a little embarrassing. Be respectful, definitely. It's a lesson that everyone should take. When you go to another country, just be respectful of the local people and the local laws. However, I must say that there is just a little element of classism here that you also sort of recognized at the start, where in the article in the Times about this, they mentioned that one of the methods to reduce the amount of tourism to Amsterdam was targeting low-cost flights. And of course, this doesn't just reduce the overall level of tourism, it reduces a particular type of tourist.
Yeah.
And I think this plays into a lot of the discussion about travel that gets sort of communicated through environmentalism and so on. But really, at the end of the day, it's like, I wanted to have this nice exclusive vacation, but you, great unwashed, are ruining it. And now the funny thing too about this article is that at the end, after talking about demarketing the country to Brits, the article finishes with an advertisement about how great Amsterdam is and all the wonderful things you can do there. It's a bit like Prince Harry in camo and an orange vest. Like, do you want to be seen or not? Like, make up your minds.
Could we all agree that if they could who votes against them banning stag weekends and hen weekends permanently? Anyone votes against that?
What? Sorry, I'm so too busy laughing at what Ashley said there. Go on, say it again.
Does anyone vote against banning stag weekends and hen weekends permanently?
In the world?
In the world.
What,
yes, I think that's ridiculous.
York have tried it, haven't they? They've tried to ban it
have they?
Because it's got so out.
Look, we know that you really hate stag and it's specifically hen weekends.
It's both.
No. Tell the story. Quickly tell the story about the Glasgow.
In Glasgow airport, I was sitting down quietly in the corner. I just heard this Jurassic Park style rumbling noise. And I look around, and all of a sudden, bursting through the double doors are 11 women clutching giant dildos at 8:30 in the morning, drunk. And I just shriveled into a toilet. Please don't notice me.
Don't use that word.
Yeah. I shriveled in every
children.
sense. Yeah.
That's just a normal Friday morning in Leeds.
Mummy wants a dildo.
Yeah. Every part of me shriveled away from that order.
Okay, stop. Just behave yourself.
Sorry. So I'm frightened of them.
Your
yes.
party pre.
Yeah, exactly. Well done. Hen party pre. Now, enough of all of that. Well done, everyone. I thought we covered some pretty important social issues before it descended to
smut.
To smut, as ever. Andy and Ashley, great to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Andy Cook and Ashley Frawley there.